Hi everyone, I can see already a few people here. We are still waiting for others to join, and then we are going to start. Hi. Oops. So for everyone who just arrived, I was just saying that we are still waiting for some other people to arrive, but I just wanted to start because there is no like waiting room, so that no one thinks that something is not working. In the meantime, my name is Olivia Exton, and I'm going to host the webinar as well, but also I'm going to present. Just one more second. I think we are going to wait until 2 minutes past 3, and then we are going to start. Nice mistakes of hosting online, forgetting to unmute yourself. Anyway, so my colleague is also going to join us in 1 second. He's just facing some technical difficulties, and then we are going to start. Okay. Until he arrives, I will. Okay. 1 second. Something happened to his laptop, so he's just going to join at the end. Okay, good. Then we are just going to start. Also, so just a few words about today. It's a webinar session, so that means that I will allow you to basically talk right now, and because I think that's the fair. And if you have any questions or something, or you're just facing any, like you cannot hear me or something happened, then just please let me know. Oh, it did happen. Hi, Gergo. Gergo, do you want to just say 2 words before I shoot with the presentation, or at the end, perhaps?
You can do it. Actually, you know everything.
Okay. So I was just saying that I will allow like everyone to talk, which means that you will be able to unmute yourself, but at the same time, I would like to ask everyone to mute yourself. And I'm going to hold the presentation. And at the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions, and then just raise your hand. And then once I call you out, then just please unmute yourself and ask the question. So now I'm just going to click on everyone to allow you to talk. And also going to see each other. Good. Amazing. So thanks again for coming. I'm going to share now my screen. Second. Okay. Share, come on. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for responding as well. Okay, as I said, if something happens you cannot see or hear, then just please unmute yourself and just feel free to shout out, because you know how these workshops are like, online things can sometimes work out. So again, very warm welcome to everyone, and this is going to be our first official workshop. And today I'm going to talk about challenges of international market entry. And the workshop is going to basically be, first I'm going to introduce myself and Startup Campus in a few words, and then I'm going to give you an overview of the program. And finally, I'm going to have the actual webinar of the challenges of international market entry. And at the end, as I mentioned before, we are going to have the questions. So I myself, my name is Olivia Exton, as I said. I work in the London office of Startup Campus, and I've been working here for 3 years already. And I'm mainly focusing on international programs, also supporting companies on one-to-one sessions during their international expansion, setting up a strategy, going through marketing or sales strategies, and also basically programs that are bringing startups into Europe and bringing startups from Europe abroad. So it's a role with individual sessions and also big sessions and different kind of tasks that I have. But a bit about Startup Campus. So our mission of Startup Campus Global and Startup Campus in general is to build bridges between international ecosystems and support startups internationalization in Europe and overseas. And that's also part of the reason why we were working very hard on creating this program, and why we're also so excited to have startups from Hungary, from the Czech Republic, from Slovakia and Poland. And I'm very excited to meet you all and also to have our one-to-one sessions. So global expansion. By working with a lot of companies, the reason why we started off the global part of Startup Campus is because first we started off as a university educational program here in Hungary for students who had an idea and they didn't really know how to turn this idea into an actual company. And after that, we had our own fund as well. We started investing in these companies and we turned into an incubator. And we saw that actually a lot of companies have great ideas and they are actually very successful. But somehow when it comes to the internationalization process, that's when a lot of things go very badly. And what we saw throughout working with numerous companies is that the questions that they find difficult to answer, even though the questions themselves are quite short, is when to expand, where to expand, and how to expand. So that's our mission with Startup Campus Global, is to help you answer these questions and to support you really in internationalizing your company in a very successful way. So our programs are all based basically on the so-called 3E framework. So educate, experience, and expand, because we believe that first you should have the education and the methodology on how to do things. Once you have the know-how, that's when you should go out and experience it and test yourself, test the theories. Does it work? Does it not work? How to change, how to fix things. And once you have the validation, that's when you should actually start the expansion itself. And we have 3 offices, so one in Budapest, one in Berlin, and one in London. And we also have quite a few strong connections in countries from Morocco to Azerbaijan to India to Brazil to the Philippines. So we have a pretty big international network ourselves. And now the V4 Global Export Readiness Programme and the program details. So now it's about how the program is going to look like. Obviously, I guess you saw the website itself, so you know the details already, but just to have a recap. So why do we do it? What I said about Hungary as well. Sorry, I heard someone. Is there a problem or? Okay, probably it was just a mistake. So basically, why we are doing this. So the V4 region is a truly amazing region with a lot of talent, and it's also a very diverse region. And there are so many amazing companies and amazing people. I don't know who is it, but I can hear someone from the background. And just please unmute yourself, or mute yourself, sorry. So, and basically what we see is, even though there is so much know-how here and so much wisdom and everything is given in the sector, even though it's a fairly new or still an upcoming ecosystem that the V4 countries have, even though we should have more international success stories, despite our not so long history of the innovation ecosystem, despite all these, we should have more international success stories, but we don't have as many as, for example, let's say Germany or the US. I mean, that's an extreme example, but we could do way better. But somehow, still our companies are not going to be a global, or not as many of our companies are going to be a global or an international success story. So partly the aim of this program is to really support you and give you the methodology, give you the connections, give you the know-how, and make you really, not just in your own specific country, but also internationally, globally, a success story. And basically, this is the whole goal of this program. So to those who are the few selected companies, the 8 companies in the program itself, who are part of the Export Academy, you are going to have 8 personal consultation sessions. So the first one is going to be on product market fit testing. Then the second one is going to be on go-to-market strategy and international environment. The third one is competition and benchmarking. Then value proposition design, branding and marketing, resource management, and fundraising, broken down into 2 parts. And at the very end of the program, we are going to have a demo day in front of international investors. And the point is really to test the knowledge that you gathered, and you also actively used already, because we are also giving you some homework. And then what we want to see is to have, this before after. So you started in a way, and then at the demo day is where you can shine and show how much you learned throughout the program. So we also have webinars, 13 webinars, and this is open to anyone. So if you have any other friends or founders, people who are interested in these topics, or anyone in your network that could be interested, feel free to invite them, because this is open to anyone. And these 13 webinar topics are going to be partly held by local ecosystem players and experts, external experts, and key people from the region. So these are, I'm just going to read it out loud quickly. So challenges of international market entry, that's today. Introduction to the Hungarian ecosystem, Polish, Czech ecosystem, and Slovak ecosystem. Then introducing the UK and the German health ecosystem, the European health ecosystem in general. Then doing business across the EU, regional and wider perspectives, the European granting scheme, working with pharmaceuticals, selling cure in B2B and B2C sales, B2B and B2C, fundraising for healthcare businesses, pitching and storytelling, communicating healthcare in an easy to understand way. That's also very important. And innovation around the globe, which is going to be a fireside chat, really people from different kind of countries are going to share their perspective on this whole topic of healthcare, innovation, and progress in this area around the globe itself. What is very important and what I want to highlight is, here is the link, and this is actually the website itself where people can register for the webinars. So as I said, if you have anyone who could be interested in this, just forward the website, and then they are going to be able to register to all the webinars, all the 13 webinars. And if you want to share it on social media or anywhere else, then please feel free. We are very happy to see that. Also very important to mention our partners. So obviously, besides us, there are some other key players as well who have been working hard to create this program, which partly is a Startup Hub Poland, DEX Innovation Centre, and Civitta in Slovakia. And thank you very much for the Visegrad Fund, because they're the one who actually sponsored and financed this whole program. And that's why we were able to be here today, all of us. So big shout out to the Visegrad Fund. And now let's start the webinar itself. Is there anything that you want to highlight or ask before we continue to the webinar about international market entry? So everything was clear? Okay, sounds like everything is fine. Okay, so before we dive in, like what I want to ask is do you even know what is the difference between a startup and an SME? And the reason why this is a very important question is because the key difference is that a startup by definition is meant to be global, because they are answering a problem that is not only that you can not only discover in a specific region, but maybe in a different way, but you can have the same problem globally, and people are facing the same problem globally. Whereas an SME can obviously face a global problem and give an answer to it and a solution. However, by definition, it is not meant to be global. It can only be just a local company. And this is why we find it very important that as a startup, from the idea phase already, you're thinking with a global mindset and not just within the frame of your own country. And yeah, so this is basically the definition. So why is international presence important? What can you gain from international presence besides the fact that, okay, obviously I want to have more customers? So a new approach and competitiveness, so standards. So often in your own country, you are facing some challenges, and they are great challenges. But if you go to a different market or a larger market, obviously the competition is going to be more intense. It's going to be different. So it immediately already pushes you to think in a different way and have a different kind of approach, and basically make you even better than before. Sorry about, I hope you cannot hear the noise in the background. Yeah, so this is one of the key things that you can gain from an international presence. And then basically, just 1 second, I'm going to just ask, I'm in the office and it's a bit loud. 1 second, then I'm going to be back. I will just ask to, oops, 1 second. Turn off the music, 1 second. So I'm back. Sorry about this. Sometimes if it's a phone ringing, sometimes you can hear the colleague in the background. Anyways, so back to the presentation itself. So yeah, what I said is obviously that what you can learn is you can make yourself a lot better if you are exposed to different kind of challenges outside of your comfort zone. What I said at the beginning, obviously, if you are going to a larger market, you are going to have a much larger sales and larger growth potential for your own company. So that's also a great thing. And it's obviously a much different approach if you're selling something to 10 million people, or if it's a market with 80 million people or 350 million people. Also in terms of fundraising, it is going to be, if you're going to a different market, if there are more investors, you have way more exposure to raise funds. And also in a different market, it might be that you need a larger round, and which you are not able to really gather in your own country, but in a foreign country, you are going to be able to achieve that. So that's also a reason why it's a great opportunity to go forward with international expansion, and why it is important. And also in terms of risk management. So if you are based in different kind of countries, like for example, SMEs, which is a global industry leader. And basically what their success story is they are from Mexico. There was a huge crisis in Mexico, currency crisis. And the reason why SMEs was able to survive is because obviously they had in different kind of countries an operation going on. And that was able to pay for all the loss that they had in Mexico. So all the other companies that were in the industry went bust in Mexico because of this crisis, but because they had obviously in other countries an operation, which, as I said, helped them, that's why they were able to actually buy up their competitors in Mexico after this whole crisis. So this is also a reason why your risk management is going to be even though it's risky to expand internationally, at the same time, it is going to help in the long term. And the other thing is also cost-effective operations. So I'm pretty sure everyone is aware that large organizations like Skype, Google, or Revolut, or different kind of large organizations, they are headquartered in countries such as the US or the UK, but they have these SSCs, so service centers. They have them in a lot of Eastern European countries. The reason why is obviously they have great quality, but for a much lesser price. So if you are having an international presence, then this is also something that you can tap on and make the most out of it. So the challenges of international market entry are, well, it's a long list, but the question would be like, what do you think, what are the key challenges? And here is already like an example, like 1,000 things to do, insufficient amount of money, lack of skills. But is there anyone who is happy to unmute themselves and say some extra examples that you already might have faced, or what you think are the biggest challenges when it comes to international expansion? Anyone?
Shall I jump in? Just to break the ice. So the local presence itself can be challenging to maintain.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Greg. Anyone else? Please don't feel shy to be like this. This whole thing is supposed to be a friendly kind of webinar, so we are happy to hear. Hi.
Hi guys, I'd add kind of a funny thing that we encountered with one of our customers. We received the question if we are trustworthy enough because we are from Eastern Europe, if we are not installing any virus to the customer, which was a hospital in Western Europe.
Really?
So the trust, bridging the trust from Eastern to Western Europe might be the case.
That's very true. You're not the only one. We also experienced this quite a few times, that Eastern Europe, also in general, they are a bit looked upon as a second-class European citizens often, and often the whole trust thing is also lying in this. But yeah, it's definitely like a problem. And thank you, Ed, for the comment. Anyone else? Okay, well, we don't have that much time, so hopefully by the end of the presentation you will have some questions. So yeah, what Ed said, what also Greg said, and these are all big challenges, but obviously the list can go on. And we highlighted 3 big challenges that we see companies facing all the time. The one is that it's risky. So you're going to an unfamiliar place that you don't really know probably. And that means that even though if you're doing a lot of research, it can take a while until you kind of figure out everything. And there can be always something that you just never thought of because of business differences, cultural differences, whatever. And it is going to cause a problem for your business. And even though you did your research, you have never heard of this because you just never lived in this country, and it's not something that people would put online or discuss. So obviously one thing that we can say is do as much research as you can before you actually expand to a country, but at the same time, despite all the research, it is going to be risky. And it also requires local presence if you want to expand to a certain, like different kind of markets, because obviously now because of COVID, even though it is a very sad thing, at the same time, it actually helped to jump over these boundary issues, or like these kind of face-to-face and trust, going back to trust as well, these trust issues, because people had to do business even though they haven't seen each other. So that did change a bit, but it's a question like in the post-COVID era how this is going to be sustained or not. Like everyone has like a different kind of theory. But just to give you another example, in London or in the UK, like having online networking events was a thing that if you mentioned it, everyone just started laughing. And now because of COVID, they had to do it, but and I'm not sure if it is going to stay like this in the post-COVID era, because the market is just too crowded and there are way too many events. So yeah, that's something that you should always calculate in, that local presence is important, that you are having your boots on the ground representing your company. And that is not a easy thing to do. And the third thing is, for this reason, is because it's because of this local presence building, and also because like it could be a more expensive market that you're expanding to, or like a more expensive country. This is why the reason why international expansion is difficult, is because it is expensive. So and besides just paying for all the plane tickets and these kind of things, at the same time, a lot of founders underestimate the length of the sales cycle that you have, and that they just run out of money, and that's why they are going to be unsuccessful. So these are the key things that we wanted to highlight. And here's just one more example, the Dunning-Kruger effect. So what we saw with founders is that the lesser experienced they were, the bigger their confidence. If they were experienced, then they had very often low confidence. They always had to be reassured that, yes, you're doing right, you're on the right track. And the experts were kind of the ones who had already done that, and they are actually like fairly, like pretty confident, I would say. And this is actually a shame for those who are experienced, and they would do very well, but they are just always questioning themselves. And for those who have not much experience, it can be very dangerous just going forward and just losing out a lot of money. So this is also something that is important to keep in mind. So how can we overcome risky and local presence issue, and that international expansion is expensive? So what I would highlight here, it is difficult to consider market specific needs, and this is why often I would suggest what is better is, even if you're shooting to a larger market, for example, which would be the case, let's say you have a country where you're from, it's 10 to 50 million people are living there, but then you want to expand to a market where there are 80 million people. So now if you want to expand to that 80 million people country, then it can be actually that the market that you want to target, it's actually way bigger than your own market, and it would actually make sense, and it would be still very profitable if you would, within this market segment, you would look for some niche things where you can actually accelerate, because it is, you're really having that product market fit with these kind of customers to, in a way, like in a very, very good way. And that you're rather focusing on this niche market within the market rather than shooting in general, just because it is already much larger than your own market in your home country, and it's still going to be profitable, and therefore the risk is going to be less. And in terms of like the local presence, what I would also highlight is it's very important to build connections before you actually expand somewhere. So use your own connections if you already have some, or if you have friends who have been there, who have done business there, contact them. If they are going to introduce you to someone, that's going to feel much different than when it's a cold call or a cold email. But at the same time, go to online events, online networking events, and start building these relationships before you actually make the move. And they can already give you a lot of feedback that is going to also like lessen the risk, and have allow you to have more knowledge on that market and the specific needs. And yeah, these are the kind of things. And one more thing too important to consider is, like, obviously not everything can be managed from a distance. So it is important to also calculate in that you are going to have to be there physically from time to time. But obviously, if you are managing things well, then you can decrease the amount of offline time that you have to spend in a foreign market. And often, like, it's also very important to consider, like, which country that you're expanding to, whether you can actually finance the whole sales in that country, or that country is just too expensive. And even though it would be great, you should first look to a rather slightly different country, which just managing things there and managing like a sales strategy there would be less expensive. And that is why overall it is going to be more profitable for you to shoot to the country that is slightly less expensive, and you might not have such a big profit margin, but at the same time your costs are not going to be as high. So it actually is less risky and less expensive overall to expand there rather than to a country where you can charge way more to the user or to the partner, but at the same time, it's just going to be, if you're not ready yet financially to finance that sales strategy over there. And also what is very important is to always budget for costs that you were not aware of, and always have this kind of backup plan for worst case scenario if you have to pay for anything that you were not aware of. So this is also something that that is important to have in your back of your mind. So what is the key to success overall? Our answer to this is a well-planned and dynamic international market entry strategy, because strategy is the one that can actually kind of prepare you to all these things that you might not be aware if you're not doing your research and you're not drawing up scenario ABC. And then you can always, even if something comes along your way that you were not 100% aware of, you can always kind of change it a bit and adapt your strategy to that. And the way how we would define a good strategy is a strategy is the art of defining our long-term flexible plan to reach our goals by continuously examining and accommodate to our changing internal and external environment. So it's key to have a good strategy, but at the same time, to have flexibility in your strategy is also very important. So what is strategy, and what is your goal? So opening an office abroad is not a strategy. Spending on expansion is not a strategy, and increasing the revenue is also not a strategy. So these are kind of goals rather, but this is not a strategy that you, or these are things that you cannot call a strategy. And because strategy, it has to be it has to have like concrete steps, it has to be specific, and it also has to be systematic. And overall, like it should be like the journey itself on the long term. So always have a long-term strategy and break it down to shorter strategies, and same goes for goals. And that's going to be way easier than to expand and to adapt in the long term. So what you need for a successful implementation and to have this specific strategy, but at the same time be flexible, because I know it's like this chicken egg question. So what we suggest, first of all, is have courage, but think back to the Dunning-Kruger effect, like have courage and go for it, but not in an unwise way. At the same time, have patience, because very often you're going to get a no if you go to abroad, and giving up too early is also not a good strategy. And at the same time, be open, because things might be different and it might have been done in a different way. And it's important to be open and to adapt to these kind of local specific things and business or cultural things. And at the same time, having having KPIs in general is key. Working towards deadlines and adapting the deadlines if needed. But if you know that you're going to run out of money by a specific date, then obviously your sales cycle, if it's not working until then you have to either raise more funds or come up with a different kind of strategy, but then you have to change your strategy. And at the same time, as we mentioned, local presence, if it is possible due to COVID, and financially as well, try to have as much as you can of that as well. So going to a foreign country, Mr. Bean is a good example of you are going to be, as I mentioned before, you're going to be unaware of a lot of things, and despite the research, it is going to be, as I said, there are going to be a lot of things that you're not aware of. So this is why we always suggest cooperation, and collaborations are great. And actually, like if you're not able to do it yourself, or you cannot hire a lawyer, for example, or your own lawyer, for example, it's always good to then just partner up with a consultant there, a local one, an accelerator, or join an accelerator program, incubator program, or hire like a third-party accountant or lawyer. And these are going to help you to have more understanding, because they are from that specific country. And at the same time, if you're not able to have your own lawyer in the company lawyer, but you have to have like an external lawyer, then you can also cut costs by these partnerships, basically. And same goes for mentors. They're also very good to have them already before you expand to that country, to have mentors from that specific country, or that they have already a lot of experience in that country where you want to expand to. So in terms of preparation, what I'm always like mentioning, what you have to do for a good preparation is internal analysis, external analysis, and at the same time also have a resource analysis. And internal and external analysis can overlap quite a bit. So the first thing that you have to ask yourself, what are your motivations and goals? Why do you want to expand to that country? What do you want to achieve there? Why not another country? Like have the why and have the answer to that as well, and have specific answers backed up with numbers as well, that are convincing to you and your entire team, and also to your investors. And once you're certain that you want to expand to that country and it is going to make sense, then it's very important to then also research the market trends and have enough knowledge of that market, and see if your product and the value that you're offering to these customers, it might be an excellent value proposition that you have in your own country, but because the country that you're expanding to is slightly different, you might have to kind of twist a bit your product and the way you actually form your marketing, and to adapt to the local needs. So be aware of that. And the great thing is to look at the competitors and to see how they communicate, where they are positioning themselves, what are the unique selling points that they are using, and are there any gaps in the market where you can fill in and really tackle that certain problem and highlight that in your strategy and communication strategy. And one more thing that is very important, or like one of the further things that is very important, is regulations. So before you actually decide and put all the money into expanding to a certain country, make sure that you can actually sell your product in that country. A great example for this is Red Bull. So when the founder of Red Bull, actually, he kind of tasted a similar drink, or like, yeah, where he had the whole idea for Red Bull, he had that drink in Thailand. And he brought it over, the recipe basically, and started off Red Bull here first in Austria. And actually, like a lot of people, even though it was a very strange thing at the time, they were actually interested and they wanted to buy. But the problem was with the regulations. So at the time, the regulation is in Austria and in general in European countries, they were just too tight. And because of certain ingredients in Red Bull, he was not able to sell the drink. So his biggest issue in terms of expanding was not because there was not enough demand, because he was selling a lot of Red Bull in underground clubs, but because there was basically the law didn't allow him to officially sell it. Then again, also business culture. That's also something that it's very important that you're not crossing boundaries or offending someone with small things that you were not aware of. So make sure that you understand the local business culture. And what I would highlight here, for example, is again, like the UK. So we had so many companies coming to the UK to certain kind of conferences. And this is like a very specific business cultural thing in the UK. Basically, we've helped them to kind of understand who are the main partners that they should talk to at this conference. They should find them, they should pitch. We prepared them everything. And the conference came, we went there, they talked, they came back, and they were like, oh my God, Olivia, you know, like I spoke to so many people, so many potential partners, and so many of them actually said, wow, your business is so interesting. And I was like, uh-oh, because the way they said interesting and the way they described the whole situation was, I knew that in the UK, when you say interesting, it's also a way, in a polite way of saying, thank you very much for introducing yourself, but it's just not for me. So these are just things that you have to know and understand, and know also how to deal with this. And yeah, and there are also some other tools that you can use, like the Pastel or Porter's 5 courses or Porter Diamond. These are certain methods that you can basically use to improve your external analysis and to really get the value and have the best understanding of that certain country and how your product is going to be an outstanding product there. And these are great methods that you can use for that. And finally, to this slide, resource analysis. So even though I myself sometimes wish that my day would be out of 48 hours, our days are made out of 24 hours. And the problem is that if you're a CEO and you have your own company, running your own company already and growing that in your home country, it is going to take up a lot of time. Now, if you want to expand to a different country, the biggest mistakes that CEOs and companies do is that the CEO is kind of the one who's trying to oversee, but at the same time run the day-to-day things of the business. Because when you start off, I mean, this is not a problem, like this is something that is normal, because when you start off a company, you are all the departments in one person. You are legal, you are finance, you are sales, you are marketing, you are everything. But once you're ready to scale, hopefully you have already 2 employees. So then it's very important that if you want to, as a CEO, be charged of the foreign expansion, then either give the day-to-day task to someone or give this whole task of foreign expansion to one of your employees, who should at least 20 hours per week focus, to half of his job time should be focused on international expansion. And at the same time, financials. So if you don't have the money to expand internationally, then rather wait a bit longer and raise for it, and then start it, rather than starting without enough support or without enough cash, and then you just run out and you just wasted a lot of money. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So in terms of structure, these are the steps that we always suggest to follow. So step 1, selecting your target market based on the before mentioned kind of research. Then set up your entry method. So how do you want to enter that market? What is your strategy? Who do you want to contact first? These kind of things. And then have your marketing and sales strategy. So once basically you have the feedback and that you validated yourself, like how do you actually want to start selling the product, and how do you want them to make, how do you want to make them aware of your product? And then basically have make sure that you really validate your business properly in the market, and make sure you're validating your with the right customers, because often some customers might buy your product, but at the same time onboarding them is, for example, very expensive. And you have customers, but overall it's actually a minus because it's just too expensive to get these customers. So then these are not the right customers for you because it's just too expensive to have them. So then even though to some extent you validated them yourself, at the same time you're not going to make money. So just make sure that it is a proper validation, and it's something that it's going to make a profit for you. And then once you have all these, that's when the customer acquisition comes, and we always suggest to do the fundraising once you're validated yourself in the country where you want to expand, if you want to raise funds in that country where you are expanding to. Because of it, like a lot of investors are saying, I'm very happy that this, for example, this health tech startup works well in Hungary, but Hungary is a very different market to the UK. How do you prove to me that it is also going to work in the UK? So that's something that it's not all investors are like this. Some of them specifically also invest in specific regions, like the V4 region or the DACH region. So then they might have a different approach, but very often we have this feedback. Good. So selecting the target market is difficult. Obviously, if you are going to select a bad market where customers are just not right for you, then it doesn't matter how good your product is. It doesn't matter how good your team is. You are not going to make money. So making sure that you are choosing the right market is key. So analyze what are the trends in that market, how big is the market size, how is the market growing, or is it shrinking, or is it stagnating? In the long term, this is also going to be very important. The customers that you have, is their income actually growing, or is it actually decreasing? Like, for example, if it's like the middle class in a lot of countries is actually like decreasing. So these are also things that you should be aware of. Economic indicators and stability, like obviously if that country is, I don't know, likely to have a political like system is going to change, then it is likely that it's also going to impact your company as well. And obviously competitors. So if a competitor is really dominating that country, well, it's going to be either very expensive for you to go against this competitor, like very expensive, or you have to find a very good spot that this competitor is not covering, and make sure that the message is key, that customers who are unsatisfied with the big competitor that you have there can be satisfied if they're going to choose you because of X, Y, Z. And then basically how you can improve your competitive strength in the country where you are expanding to is, as I mentioned before, the market share. So is there a gap for you? Is there a lack of something that you can tap onto? Strategic partnerships that you can build up. So you might have a solution, but you're going to build up, like you have some other companies that can actually work well with your solution, then you kind of collaborate, you end up in a strategic partnerships, and then you offer like a whole package, so the customer doesn't have to go anywhere else, and they have like a full-on solution if they choose you. And obviously, like market knowledge and product fit is key. And here's also a video that you can check this out. We're going to send you the presentation, and basically here you can find out more about this. Yeah, size matters. But what do we measure? That's a very important question, because even though like a lot of things can sound good, like going to a big market with 300 million people, if the logistics is going to be too expensive to actually export your product there, or to fix machines, if it's a hardware, for example, you might be in Poland, but you want to sell in India. How are you going to do the logistics of having an engineer who actually also understands and really knows how to fix that hardware? Can you find an engineer there, or do you have to send an engineer? Does it make sense? Or actually, even though like the Hungarian market is much smaller than the Indian market, it's way closer. So overall, it's going to be more cost efficient to start in Hungary and then expand. Like here, like Walmart is a good example that they are not expanding from one point of the globe to the other, but rather they expand regionally. Maintenance and support, I think I kind of covered that. Communication, obviously if there are language barriers or then it's also going to be an issue, so make sure that you speak the language, or you have someone, or they in like English, if like obviously that's the international business language. Make sure that that country actually speaks it, because if you go to Latin America, I was just there not long ago, the average, I would say, average person doesn't really speak any English, and that could, if your solution is like specific to this or that, then this actually might cause a problem for you. Obviously, people in business, they are going to speak English, but yeah, these are just things that you have to consider. And then obviously like local presence, like how expensive is it going to be to maintain your local presence? Like for a Hungarian company to have an office in London, it's very, very expensive. But for a UK company to have an office in Hungary, it's actually, for them, it sounds like an extremely good deal. So yeah, language we covered, religion, obviously just make sure that you're not trying to sell, I don't know, certain things in countries where it's not allowed, or things are just very different. So that's something to consider. Traditions, the British, interesting, it's a good way, but also just that's my experience, and don't take it for granted. But what I saw, if I have to have meetings and actually like programs and such with, for example, with Asian partners, in the culture itself, it's embarrassing if you say you didn't understand it, or that you don't know what the answer to the question is. And that's in their culture in general. Not everyone, but in general, it's like that. So often you explain something and they say yes, but actually they didn't understand it. And that is going to be a problem for you to do progress. So these are things that you should be aware of. Speak to someone who has experience with negotiating in that specific country or such, and get some advice. And well, your also experience helps a lot, to be honest. And be aware of the history of the country where you're expanding to, and don't say things that they are going to be upset about. Good thing is, like, if you're coming to Hungary, don't mix up Bucharest and Budapest, for example. Yeah, so these are the things that I would highlight. And conformity of the administrative environment. So just a few more words about this. So make sure that that things such as opening, for example, a bank account or registering a business, like how difficult is that? For example, in the UK, registering a business, it takes roughly 48 hours. Whereas in Germany, you need like 35,000, 25,000 euros to open a company. And it's actually cheaper to buy another company and just rename it and redo some things rather than opening your own company. Whereas if we look at opening a bank account in the UK is very difficult for a company. But in other countries, for example, if you go to Estonia, it's actually fairly easy. Regulative environment as well, so be aware of the accounting system, the law, because this is, if you don't know how things are done, then you can face financial penalties and legal issues as well. So that's critical, and we always advise to hire a local legal consultant. Yeah, and then just things such as with the law, for example, just make sure that maybe it makes sense to sell a product to China for various reasons, but because of different customs, it is going to end up like to be very expensive, and overall it doesn't make sense to do it. So just make sure that you're also aware of this before you actually make the step to expand internationally. And political structure as well. Obviously, wouldn't want to, let's say, open up a business in a place where the political stability is very bad, or yeah, these kind of basic things about opening up a business. Also, another thing, one more, is purchasing power, for example. That's something that you should consider. So a lot of countries, like, they have a big number. They, like, for example, I would use again India. So over 1 billion people, but at the same time, the average person is living under $1 per day, on $1 per day. So you might want to launch your application there, but the people who are having the buying power is like, the country itself, it's a good number, but the actual people who have the buying power to buy your product is actually marginal. Whereas if you would launch your the same kind of application in, let's say, Germany, even though there are only, let's say, like in brackets, only 80 million people, but still, like, the average income is much, much higher than in India. And it's a wealthy country, and the purchasing power and the number of these people is going to be actually, in general, it might be actually then higher than in India, for example. Also, IBM is, for example, like a good example in terms of when you're expanding, to make sure that you have the availability of human resources and prices. So it might be good to expand to a country and outsource certain operations to somewhere because it's cheaper. But for example, IBM, even though it outsourced a lot of things to India, the skills were not there. So it was very difficult to actually get the company's operations started there and to maintain quality as well. So that's also very important, that when you're expanding, to make sure that the people and the workforce that you need is actually available, has the right price, and has the right skills. And obviously, development of infrastructure. If you don't have, for example, good internet in a country, it's going to be difficult to do business. And make sure that you have all the equipment and environment and available certain materials that you might need to use for production in the certain country where you want to expand and actually want to launch some production lines, for example. So yeah, the general advice would be, the smaller the distance, the easier the market entries. So that means basically not just the physical distance, but basically that, for example, that, sorry, I just have to drink water because I'm talking a lot. So, for example, the smaller the distance could be also that a language barrier, or like the law or legal barrier would be like smaller between, the language barrier would be smaller between, for example, between Germany and, there's someone in the chat with something. Okay, good. Thank you, Marcin. See you a bit later, and I'm happy that your colleague is going to stay until the end. So yeah, like for example, the language barrier, for example, between India and the UK, and also the cultural barrier and history and all this is smaller. But because of raw material or working skills, a workforce, for example, it is actually going to be much bigger. So you have to kind of weigh up like what is important for you and what is not. So obviously, like if you don't have these barriers or these distances, let's say, like for example, the language distance, like language barrier, then it is going to be easier to access the market. But make sure that why it is easier outweighs the things that are not easy, because otherwise it is going to be actually difficult. So yeah, that's what we would actually advise. Oops. What else may be crucial when selecting your target market? So strategic partnerships, make sure that you're starting to building this up from an early on, online and then also offline. And existing connections, look out, check your network. Do you already have people there? Do you know someone who knows someone there? Going out from that point of view, it's going to be much easier than, as I said, writing cold emails. And also international treaties. For example, Hungary and Azerbaijan signed a bilateral agreement. And this is why we were able to kind of tap onto this and start a startup accelerator program between Hungary and Azerbaijan. And it was much easier now than, for example, 2 years ago, because we had this bilateral agreement. So watch out for these kind of treaties between your own country and the country where you want to expand to, and then you can tap onto these possibilities that the treaties are going to allow you. And also, like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, and then here's just some other things, like how like larger companies are kind of weighing up on how to expand. So Bartlett and Ghoshal's international strategies model is kind of weighing up there are like basically 2-3 things that they are considering: the pressure for global integration, so keeping the cost low, and where you should place yourself and why. And basically they, I can maybe kind of go on to this. Sorry, oops. So yeah, so basically the pressure for global integration and the pressure for local responsiveness. So what should you do? Like, should you have the cost low, or should you really respond to the local culture and the local kind of like everything? So what you should do, and they basically identified 4 main things: so the global strategy, the international strategy, transnational strategy, and the multi-domestic strategy. And basically what they identified is, for example, with Pfizer, pressure for local responsiveness is low, but pressure for global integration is high. So basically this means that they are highly centralized, they focus on efficiency, so basically economies of scale, little sharing of expertise locally, and they are having more like a headquarter where they are doing like all the research and development, and they have like small on-site, like local manufacturing things going on, and they have very much like standardized products. Now, for example, with UPS, they have the international strategy, so the pressure for local responsiveness is low, pressure for global integration is also low. So basically the key features are they're aiming to achieve efficiency by focusing on domestic activities, and international operations are largely managed centrally, and relatively little adaptation of products to local needs. Even though McDonald's is here, I would kind of disagree with this, because very often McDonald's is creating products that is reflecting the local kind of traditional like way of consuming foods, or some local recipes. So yeah, I'm not sure if McDonald's should be 100% there. I think it's like kind of between this and transactional strategy. So yeah, moving on to transactional strategy. So the pressure for local responsiveness is high, and pressure for global integration is also high. And therefore they have a complex to achieve strategy. And their aim is to maximize local responsiveness, but also gain benefits from global integration. And basically they have a wide share of expertise, wide sharing of expertise, so in terms of technology and staff, etc. And then finally, the multi-domestic strategy. So here, pressure for local responsiveness is high, and pressure for global integration is low. So here, basically, they want to maximize the benefits of meeting local market needs, and to really react to that and satisfy the customers through extensive customization. So they really tailor making their products to the local market. But the decision making is decentralized, and basically local businesses treated as separate businesses. So they're not really having like a one central office where all the, like for example with Pfizer, where okay, this is the vaccine, and we are not going to have a slightly different vaccine in this country in comparison to that country. But here with, for example, Nestle, they're very much like kind of individual branches more, and therefore they have like strategies for each country. So these are the kind of ways of handling like the model of certain like strategies. But there's also like a video we are going to add it to this slide, and then you can check it out if you want to get more information on that. And yeah, this is the last 2 slides. So sorry, I'm just like getting a very sore throat slowly. Or I should say dry throat. So basically, when you're expanding somewhere, as I said, it can be expensive. So you have to kind of weigh up. Do you want to rather have like a complete external operation? So you want to have there an office, have a local, like hiring a local person, and doing things like yourself there, or you kind of want to end up like partnering up with like a local partner and kind of go for the export strategy. And here you can see like the 2 arrows. And this basically shows that if you're going to do everything yourself in that certain country, then your costs are going to be higher. The risk is going to be higher, but therefore you are going to basically have more control and more flexibility. Yeah. But if you are going for the export, you're going to have less flexibility because obviously your partner is going to determine quite a few things. You're going to have less control, but you're going to have more risk. You're going to have less risk, and you're going to have also less costs. It's not going to be so expensive. So this is something that there is no one size fits all kind of way. It has to be you who weighs up everything, calculates everything, and then decide what is more comfortable for you. And this is why, because the reason why is because at all startups, they have insufficient money, and for these kind of expansion strategies, or like expanding to like a foreign country, and also like not as much experience in the whole expanding to like a certain country, and also not knowing, or so not enough knowledge, and you don't have as many employees, and that is something that is going to make, I think, challenging. But at the same time, if you feel or you do have the funds, then having like complete external operation would make more sense than rather than partnering up, for example. So gradual exposure is important, and we would suggest to involve at least at the beginning partners, and then once you kind of establish yourself, then you should do it yourself if you want to, or if it makes more sense to do it that way. But at the beginning, just take it, do it, and be agile, but and like don't wait for too long with international expansion, but don't want to suddenly expand to 10 countries at the same time, but rather step by step. It makes more sense, and yeah, having some partners is always good. And then basically with the competitors, and this is then the last slide, then I hope you have some questions already prepared. So if you're expanding somewhere, obviously you're going to have competitors, and I was mentioning before to tap onto like a gap that they might have. But it is like, again, like something that I want to highlight is that it's things such as I'm better than in everything than all the competitors, or I'm cheaper than the competitors, or just having like these general kind of things that I keep on hearing from startups is it's not enough if you want to go to like a foreign market, because your biggest problem is your competitors, they're already locals there, and so you're starting from a disadvantaged position. So it's very important that you identify, okay, what is exactly that I want to highlight, why the customers in this foreign market should choose me. Is it because I'm more tailor-made? Is it because pricing is not something that I like if people use, to be honest. Sometimes it can work, but most of the time there's always someone who's going to be cheaper than you. Is it because my solution is really covering everything and gives like a complex solution and not just to one specific thing? Or really, so like we kind of have to find a dimension that you are the best at, and you're way better than your local competitors at this specific thing, and really focus on that and highlight that, and then also put the message in a way that the customers, they are aware that, okay, even though you're a newbie in that country and you are like a new company, this is, if for someone this was the biggest pain point, that all the competitors, what they have done was not tailor-made enough, for example, and that yours is always going to be like, for each person it's going to be different. As I said, this is just an example now. For someone for whom this is the most important, you're already going to get these customers, and it's better to start like this, and rather than say we are much better than your competitors in everything, and then like, okay, that's a bit like Mission Impossible, but sure. So that's not something that either investors or also customers, they just don't really understand. So yeah, you have to decide what this is going to be, and it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a very interesting and exciting journey. So that was a presentation, and if you have any questions now, then just please feel free to just unmute or like raise your hand, and then I'm just going to basically ask you to say the question. Any questions or any challenges? Is there anyone already who already started their foreign market expansion? So they already have a business in another country? I would welcome any kind of response. I mean, if like saying a few words now and sharing your experience, that's also helping like other people. So not yet. Or maybe then just write in the chat like who has not done any kind of foreign market expansion here. So if you're only operating in the country where you are registered, basically, can you just write like, yay, me? Maybe the problem is that it's Friday afternoon, people are not as responsive.
I believe this is also a good example of the cultural differences that you just described. If it would be like a group of American or UK startups, I believe we would have much more questions, but you know, this is a kind of regional tendency what we have here. But I just want to encourage everyone, like, don't be shy, you know, this is the opportunity to ask. I know this is something quite uncommon, but still, if you have anything to add or ask, you know, we are here.
Okay, I mean, if you don't have any questions now, or you're just a bit too shy to ask now in front of others, that's also fine. Obviously, as Greg said, we'll be very happy, not now, but in the future, you would kind of learn and to engage a bit more, because I think that's very important for everyone to kind of hear from others, the stories, experience, these kind of things. And then, so yeah, if you were just too shy to ask now, feel free to just drop us an email, and then we are more than happy to answer them. And as I mentioned before, we are going to send this presentation out, so don't worry if one of your colleagues missed it or such.
I have a question.
Oh, great.
Hi there.
Hi, Grammy.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the question, so sorry that I'm late. The thing that I would like to ask is how different is the markets in European Union, you know, like, because most like they are, in my opinion, basically like they like let's take like the V4, right? They are pretty similar, in my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong. So I mean, if you have any experiences like in other startups, like what they faced when they were expanding, I'm talking about like the software, the application that we are expanding, not like the hardware. So yeah, if you have any experience, you could share.
But can you just rephrase the question again? So what exactly?
Yeah, I mean, has anyone ever faced like any problems into expanding into like the if they are like in the V4, right? We are like in Czech Republic, for example. So if we would like to expand to Hungary or Poland, let's say, right? Yeah. What kind of issues that we have to expect that we will face, or in other countries like in European Union?
So the V4 in comparison to the EU, that's the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I would say the good thing is, I mean, it's actually different because Poland is 40 million people, Hungary is 10, Slovakia is less. So I think it's roughly 5. So it's kind of a bit difficult because it's not just the region itself, but also the size of the country. But what I would say, for example, if you are expanding to Hungary, a plus side is that it's a small country, so 10 million people, or in Slovakia, you're going to get the network that you want in a very fast way. So getting to know the right people, them introducing you to someone who is your potential business partner is going to be much faster, or to getting even to a corporate is going to be much faster and more efficient and cost effective than, for example, if you go to Germany or if you go to the UK. But that's more on the country. Then the other thing is, again, the size. If you're expanding to Hungary, this is like a plus thing, that it's going to be much faster. But on the other side, the Hungarian language is very difficult. No one really speaks it besides Hungarians. So expanding here and for example, paying a lot of money to translate everything in on your software might not be as efficient, because there are only 10 million people here. So your user base is going to be much smaller than in Poland, for example. Even though the Polish language itself it's a Slavic language, so it has more relations to other Slavic languages, not like Hungarian, which is like an island in the Slavic Sea. But yeah, so even though the language itself is again like a specific language, and it's not like English, for example, that is being spoken in so many countries, and it's the standard English is the same in every country, or in German as well, like Hochdeutsch. So if you are writing a software, the German is going to be the same in Switzerland than in Austria and in Germany, even though the dialects are completely different. So this is what I'm saying is what you have to kind of think about. So my conclusion would be, I wouldn't necessarily highlight the for region comparison to the rest of the EU, rather than looking at the size of the country, the language, your user base, basically. The only thing that could be slightly different is the cultural or business cultural differences. So how business is being done here and how business is being done in the rest of the EU countries. I mean, that is quite different. Like in the UK, for example, like if you want to raise, for example, investment, if you're going to pitch in front of Hungarian investors, they're going to be slightly more relaxed, and you can pitch for a longer time, and if you can go a bit over time, and yeah, well, you know, and they will have questions. Also, this is generalization, so not for everyone, but in general, people are going to be a bit more relaxed. If you go to the UK, if you're not answering the question that the investor had, he's going to stop you in the middle of a sentence, and he's going to say, "You're not answering my question. Stop, please waffling. Please stop waffling around and just get to the point. Please don't waste my time." And he's saying, or she's going to say this in the most polite way. But the reason why is because the competition is way higher. So if you're not going to be a good company or someone that they find good enough, then they don't want to know more about you. Thank you. Next one. So I would say these are the differences. But Greg, is there anything that you would add to this?
Frankly, nothing. You summarized it pretty much. Yeah. So one thing is the cultural differences, and the second one is maybe just one thing to add actually is that you touched upon it briefly, but the agreements and the treaties between the countries. So compared to the rest of the world and rest of Europe, you know, we have stronger ties, so you can approach the embassies here. If you want to expand, we have like many associations in the region who can help you. And actually the EU spend a lot of money on this particular region. So you can use it as a kind of leverage. However, if you expand to Germany or the UK, I'm not too sure what treaties are in place when it comes to the Czech Republic. Still, I think you would have a favorable position here compared to the rest of the world. Plus, the cultural difference is not too big between the two countries if you measure in the distance. How Olivia just showed on a slide, and the market itself is more alike, if you like, the people, the target customers, and everyone else.
Thanks, guys.
So maybe if I may add a small comment to this about the differences, I would highlight that also the legislation is different, since the healthcare industry is very regulated on all the countries in Europe. Then there might be some obstacles in every country in particular, maybe also in Germany. Each country within Germany has its specific regulations, for example, for hospitals, etc. So it's also worth exploring what you want to sell and to whom, and if there is any requirements from the local law, which might be kind of expensive.
Thanks, Jakub.
You are muted, Olivia. Sorry.
Oh, I was saying thank you, Jakub, an excellent comment. And if anyone else has any questions. If not, then thank you very much again for attending the event. And if you have any questions, just shoot an email and we're happy to answer it. And wishing you an amazing weekend. Hopefully the weather is as good in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and in Poland as it is in Hungary. Now it's going to be a warm weekend before the proper kind of cooling down start. So thank you very much, and then see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.